And I'm joined now with my co-host, Dan Rafael. Dan, it's great to have you here once again. I'm here in Miami. Where are you at the moment?
I'm where I was last time, in my lovely home in Northern Virginia.
Well, it's we have a busy week here. We have Bam Rodriguez versus Estrada. We have Teofimo Lopez versus Steve Claggett. But we're going to go ahead and start with the Phoenix fight that's going on this weekend as well. Let's talk a bit about, Estrada versus Rodriguez.
Well, listen, this is a big-time fight. This is Juan Francisco Estrada. He is the WBC champion at junior bantamweight. He's also the lineal champion. He obviously is coming off of probably one of his biggest wins ever, which was the rubber match between him and the great Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. That was about a year and a half ago, though. But in that fight, he won the vacant WBC title, which was the belt that Bam Rodriguez gave up when he went down to the flyweight division. And while he was down in the flyweight division, Bam was making noise. He was kicking ass and taking names. He beat up on Sonny Edwards in his last fight to unify two of the titles. And at that point, he was like, okay, I've done what I needed to do here in the flyweight division by unifying belts, and decided it's time to go back to the junior bantamweight division. And the biggest name and the biggest fight that he was able to get, which made a lot of sense for both sides because of the money involved and the prestige involved, because not only for the belt but also for the lineal title, was to fight Estrada. So Matchroom Boxing was able to make that fight, put this fight in Phoenix. Going to be a ton of Bam fans there. He's from San Antonio. Going to be a ton of other Mexican fans there who probably root for Estrada. They have a big soccer game taking place in the Phoenix area the next day. It's Mexico versus Ecuador, I guess. So there's going to be tons of Mexicans that will probably be there rooting for Estrada, even though it's in Bam's country. Going to be a wild scene, it seems to me. And more importantly, Michelle, should be a really terrific fight. A lot at stake. But the one thing that I am concerned about, if you're a Estrada supporter, is that the layoff is one thing of a year and a half. The thing that is the big stark difference when you look at the stats, if you will, is that Bam Rodriguez is 24 years old and has been active and is looking sharp. And Juan Francisco Estrada is 34 years old and coming off the layoff. But more importantly, in the last fight was a very, very tough, hard fight, as his fights with Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez all have been. So it makes you question at this stage of his career, the twilight of his career at that age for such a small weight class, how effective is he going to be against a Bam Rodriguez that's looked super sharp and totally destroying Sonny Edwards the last time out.
Right. I mean, I was actually going to bring that up, just the age factor alone, the layoff. We all know what ring rust can do to your performance coming back in, facing a really tough fighter in Bam Rodriguez.
Yeah, I mean, it's look, Bam Rodriguez is laying the groundwork for, we can't get too far ahead of ourselves, but really putting together the building blocks of a Hall of Fame resume. If you take a look, Michelle, at this era, between, let's say, the flyweight and junior bantamweight division, there's been the four big names. It's been Roman Gonzalez, Juan Francisco Estrada, and then the supporting players, let's call them Carlos Cuadras and Srisaket Sarungisai. And they've all fought each other through the years, and a lot of them have been tremendous battles. And so far, the young Bam Rodriguez has defeated the, granted, a little older, sort of not in their very, very best, but still tough, formidable guys. He's beaten Cuadras. He's beaten Sarungisai. Now he's taken on Estrada. He's laying the groundwork. He's unified titles in the flyweight division. He's won belts already in two weight classes. And this is another opportunity for him not only to win another belt, get a lineal title, but do so against even the bigger name in his career, because Juan Francisco Estrada, certainly a bigger name than Sonny Edwards, so definitely more so than Cuadras and Sarungisai. And I think if you ask a lot of boxing people, Michelle, maybe I'm not sure what your opinion is here, but I view Juan Francisco Estrada, he's a lock Hall of Famer in my mind.
Right. Well, I don't think there's any disagreeing with that. One of the things that, just kind of going over stats that we were talking about, that just the fact that Bam Rodriguez, his activity speaks for itself. He's been the one way more active, fought 3 times so far this year. Honestly, Dan, how do you see the fight going on the night? Well,
it wasn't 3 times this year, but he has been more active, obviously. The only time off he really had was not because of his any kind of issues outside the ring. It's that he, in terms of business side, he had a broken jaw, so that set him back a little bit. But I see a very
2023 fought 3 times in 2023.
I see a very prime and fresh Bam Rodriguez, who is confident, who can show his punching power and his aggression, but also can box a bit. If you watched the, early on against Sonny Edwards, it looked like he was trying to box a little bit, but he found him so easy to hit, I think, that he just decided, let me just go for it, and he just kind of beat him down. Now, I think that the durability factor is probably better in terms of what he'll face against Estrada, who's never been stopped. He's got 3 losses in his career, but never been even close to being stopped in a fight before. So if he's going to win by a knockout, he's probably going to have to beat him down over the course of 12 rounds. I just don't know, what kind of spring in this step Estrada has. But what I can tell you is I think, I'm not going out on a limb here. If we don't see an exciting fight, then that would be probably the biggest upset. Whoever wins, that'd be a bigger upset than anything we'll see if it's not a crowd-pleasing kind of fight, because the crowd's going to be going crazy. These are fighters that respond to that lift of the crowd. They want to get in there and throw punches. That's been their MO pretty much their entire careers. Granted, Estrada's is a lot longer than Bam's is, but I think this is going to be a dynamite fight.
Plus, Bam really brings out a crowd out in Phoenix. The last time I was there, when I saw him face Sonny Edwards, it was a really great crowd. Yeah,
and like I said to you, I think it's going to be a lot of those folks that show up are going to be there, not only the Bam fans that are going to turn out, but also the Mexican nationals that are coming north of the border to also probably support their soccer team that plays on Sunday.
Right, exactly. I, being here in Miami, obviously I'm covering the Teofimo Lopez versus Steve Claggett fight, but has the press conference happened today yet? Have you watched the press conference, or is it even, I don't know what time it starts for Rodriguez?
I'll go back and I'll check it out after I won't watch it live because I was doing some other stuff, but I'm definitely going to check that out. Yeah. The one thing about it though, Michelle, is that these are guys who are, you've been around these guys before. Bam Rodriguez is not a trash talker at all. Very respectful to his opponents. I mean, if you start up with him, I guess he'll give it back. But I mean, I've never really heard Bam say anything in a negative way. And Juan Francisco Estrada is the consummate professional in that sense also. So I would not. You never know for sure. But I would not expect so-called fireworks at the news conference. If there was going to be, I guess it might come from Sonny Edwards, who likes to talk shit.
Right. Yeah, Sonny definitely was trying to pull that out of Bam last time. Right.
Well, the reason I say about Sonny is because Sonny is returning from the loss to fight Adrian Curiel on the undercard in the co-feature.
Well, let's talk about that fight.
Yeah, listen, these are guys that need a win. I mean, Sonny Edwards got pummeled by Bam in his most recent fight, and Curiel came out of nowhere. He scored the big upset to win the junior flyweight title against Nanshinga on a big-time knockout. They had an immediate rematch, and it was Nanshinga that got the victory by knockout. So you got Sonny coming off a knockout loss. You got Curiel coming off a knockout loss. Curiel's moving up to the next weight class, going from junior flyweight up to flyweight. So it's it's kind of a survival kind of fight because in this level of boxing, 2 losses in a row is not a good thing. And we'll see which guy can kind of, let's call it, rejuvenate themselves with a victory because they're both coming off losses, and the guy that wins is going to put himself in a great position.
Well, Dan, we're gonna go ahead and take a break, but when we come back, let's get on to Teofimo Lopez versus Steve Claggett, and I also want to talk about the interview I had with Teofimo and a few of the quotes that he had to say. So we'll be right back. And welcome back. Let's go ahead and talk, Dan, about the fight that's happening this weekend in Miami, Teofimo Lopez versus Steve Claggett. I don't think anyone's really giving Steve Claggett much of a shot at defeating Teofimo Lopez, but just to sort of make this clear, I think oftentimes, and I'm sure you can agree, that when someone doesn't really know too much about a fighter, they instantly want to write them off as, oh, they're not good. But in this case, Steve Claggett is coming off of a 9-win streak, 7 of those by knockout. Teofimo Lopez, it really took a lot away from his previous fight with Jermaine Ortiz. He was expecting Jermaine Ortiz to be a come-forward pressure fighter. We saw what happened in that fight, really threw him off. Teo said that this time around, he's expecting anything from his opponent. But let's talk a bit about that fight.
Well, Steve Claggett is a come-forward fighter. I can't fathom that he's going to be able to box the way that Ortiz did when he fought against Teofimo earlier in the year. First of all, going back to that fight that took place, look, I thought that Teofimo lost that fight. I thought that Jermaine Ortiz outboxed him, controlled the fight, frustrated Teofimo to no end, and I was disappointed with the way the scores went, not because I was rooting against Teofimo, just because I thought that the judges got it wrong. And Teofimo looked, even if you think Teofimo won the fight, he just didn't look good. Now, granted, that's partly because of the style of the opponent, but that's if at the highest level of boxing, you have to make those adjustments. And Lopez did not show the ability to make those adjustments. Now, the thing that is very maddening about Teofimo, he's a sensational fighter when you see him at his best. Absolutely sensational, super talented, can box, can punch, has the big personality. I mean, everything you want to see in a potential superstar in the sport. But the problem is he's inconsistent. So you look at him against, let's go back a few fights. He fights Sander Martin, who's going to give everybody a tough fight because of the style. He did not look good in that fight. He almost had like an emotional breakdown, it felt like, after that fight. He was so unnerved by his performance and how it went. Do I still have it anymore? He was saying to nobody in particular in the ring. But he came back after that. He looked absolutely spectacular in taking apart Josh Taylor to win the WBO title and the lineal title. It was a tremendous performance. And then didn't fight again for the rest of the year until he came back, this past February to fight Jermaine Ortiz. So after, a very forgettable performance against Martin, looked sensational against Taylor. And then he has the Ortiz fight where it was sort of like, that's what you're coming off of. The momentum he had from the victory kind of went down the drain. Now he's back in the ring against Clagett. So if you go in that kind of alternating, look great, now it's time for him to look great again. Clagett should be the perfect guy because he's going to be right in front of him. He's not going to be moving around the way Ortiz did. He's not going to be moving around the way that Sandor Martin did. And Clagett is a guy that can take the shot. He's got a good chin based on his record. He's at about, 7 losses, Michelle. He's only been stopped the one time. He's a veteran. He's been around for like 15 years or so. He's 37 years old. I mean, no offense to Clagett. He's got really, and I'm not, like you said, in the build-up to this part of the conversation, just because you don't know the guy doesn't mean he's no good. And as you were saying earlier, just because a guy doesn't have a name that you know and may have not been in big fights doesn't necessarily mean he's no good. He just does not have any defining victories on his record whatsoever. And so that does give you pause and make you think, okay, now he's stepping up into the big leagues. Whatever you think about the inconsistency that we talked about in terms of what Teofimo was brought to the ring, clearly he's the best opponent he's fought by a lot. And Teofimo has the wins and the youth and the experience at this point and the game, both as a boxer and as a puncher, that it just makes it look like a very, very difficult mountain to climb. But we've seen what happened when we say that about other fighters. We saw what happened when nobody gave George Kambosos a chance against Teofimo Lopez, and he was able to get the victory in a big upset. So you never say never, but when you take a look at it, it looks like Mr. Clagett's got a very difficult night ahead of him.
Right. And let's talk a bit about the criticism that Teofimo has received. To be fair, I was even watching an interview where Tim Bradley, and I'm aware that Tim Bradley and Teo haven't exactly had the best the best recent interactions. But Tim Bradley, he said it just like it is. There's really nobody left for him to fight at 140 at the moment. It's either, he's either going to move up to 147 or at this point, he's just going to have to keep busy, continue fighting who he can fight in order to remain active. Because as you know, there's no point in sitting out. You could be, look what happened with Bivol when he was trying to chase the big fight with Canelo. He sat out for a while. There's a lot of fighters that often make that mistake. But, instead you get criticized for wanting to stay active and stay busy, which, is to no fault of their own.
Yeah, although, I do still think there's fighters at Teofimo, if he wins against Clagett, that they could try to make at least to make some.
Yeah, but we're not talking about if he wins on Saturday. I'm talking about prior to the announcement with Clagett. It's either, that was basically he either takes the fight or he continues to wait it out and see if he could, get a unification fight. But, just to kind of defend Teo in that sense that, he's trying to stay active, and you can't fault a fighter for wanting to stay active and not wanting to put himself on the sidelines hoping to make a bigger fight.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. It's always better for the fighter to get in the ring and to stay active and keep the rhythm and keep the skills and maintain their conditioning. Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more about that. I do question a little bit the selection of the opponent. What I reported about back when this fight was being put together is that Top Rank offered Team Teofimo 4 different opponents to make this fight. One of them obviously was Steve Claggett, who they selected. But in my opinion, and if somebody wants to disagree with me, that's certainly their prerogative. But the other 3 opponents that he was offered would have, in my mind, been bigger names and better fights in terms of what the public might expect. One of those names with Kenneth Sims, who's a tremendous young contender. The other one was the young up-and-comer that Top Rank promotes, which is Raymond Morataya out of the Robert Garcia stable, who's been begging for a big-time fight. And then also you have the young Elvis Rodriguez, who recently re-signed with Top Rank. So the 4 names that were offered were those 3 plus Clagett. And the Lopez camp opted for Claggett. It's on paper, and it's not a knock on Claggett. Clearly, he's like the lesser of those other three compared to them. So it feels like that the Lopez team opted for the path of least resistance, let's say, compared to the other opponents they were offered. But the original point of your comment was, yes, it's always good for the fighter to stay active. I'd like to see him stay active against at least somebody on paper that was a little bit of a better grade of opponent than Steve Claggett.
Well, Bob Arum had mentioned, and this was obviously prior to Devin Haney vacating his WBC title, but Bob mentions that if Devin was to vacate, he would look to hopefully make a fight between him and Teofimo Lopez. I actually asked Teo about that earlier today, and I want to cut to what he had to say about a potential matchup with Devin Haney. This fight's obviously super important as well because what can come after this, Bob Arum has mentioned that if Devin Haney had vacated, which he just did, that he would look to possibly making a fight between you and Devin Haney after this fight. What do you make of that? And is that obviously something you want?
If it's not for the world title, if it's not for the belt or anything like that, that's just on white noise to me. You know, I understand Bob is doing what he needs to do as a promoter for Top Rank and everything of that sort, you know, and for fighters like myself. However, you know, I think that we're just on a different landscape right now on fighters. So we're just looking forward to seeing what happens. First things first, we got to conquer this fight and this quest right now on June 29th against Steve Claggett.
What can fans expect, Teo?
Oh my goodness, I expect a lot of things. I worked very hard on my arsenal overall, you know, so expect some beautiful jabs, some beautiful punches. And what more can I really say? It might just be early. It might be a knockout, you know. So, but we're prepared for 12 rounds. You know, this guy's never went 12 rounds, and those are the things that get me going. So I look forward to this big stage right here.
So Dan, obviously we just saw, you know, Teo saying that a fight with Devin Haney at this point, at this stage in their careers, doesn't really interest him if there's no title on the line. You know, he's really looking at those unification fights. You know, we recently have a champion, Liam Paro. We have Albert Puello, who's now been elevated from Devin Haney's WBC title. We have Isaac Cruz. You know, that's another fight that I think a lot of people would be excited to see. You know, of those three champions, you know, who would you like to see Teofimo fight?
Well, just from the fan interest and I think the action in the ring, I think of the ones you mentioned, it would certainly be the Isaac Pitbull Cruz fight. But
yeah.
And they actually are going to be on somewhat of a similar schedule, I guess, because you have Teofimo defending his title this weekend, and then you have not that far from here in the calendar is Pitbull Cruz on the August 3rd card. That's going to take place in Los Angeles on the big Saudi Riyadh Season card that's headlined by Terrence Crawford. So he's defending his title on that show. So, you know, I guess now that the different promoters and everybody seems to be able to work together a little bit more easily than has been in the past, that would certainly be an interesting fight. But, you know, I appreciate where Teofimo's coming from in terms of wanting to unify belts. But in terms of the name recognition and the level of the fight, certainly a fight between him and Haney, even Haney not having a belt, still a bigger deal than him fighting Alberto Puello or even Liam Paro, given the name recognition.
Yeah, maybe name recognition, but not legacy, would it? Because, you know, if you're trying to unify and, you know, add more hardware to, you know, or just add more hardware in general, like you're gonna want those unification fights, of course. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with Devin Haney. I know that he's saying that he's wanting to take time off. That's obviously why he said that he vacated the WBC title. Was you know, I kind of stressing the fact that he's had some like mental health struggles with everything that's happened with Ryan Garcia's situation. But just thoughts on, you know, Devin Haney kind of wanting to take a break.
Well, Michelle, as far as Devin Haney's desire to take a break, I guess it's understandable. I mean, he's gone through a lot in terms of it was a physically tough fight against Ryan Garcia, and obviously mentally, I think a lot is worn on him because of what happened in terms of the positive drug testing, all the things that have happened since then. Feeling that he was, you know, that the PEDs in his mind were a reason for the loss, and so therefore it has harmed in his mind his marketability because of the fact that there was such a low, relatively speaking anyway, a low purse bid for the mandatory defense against Sandor Martin. So he vacated the title. So he's sort of he's going through a situation where he's doing a little soul searching, trying to figure out what he wants to do. Does he want to still fight at 140? Does he want look for another title fight in that weight class? Does he want to maybe move up to 147 pounds and just get himself together both physically and mentally? And it's difficult, no doubt about it. So no one's going to force him to fight. Let him take the time he needs. He's still a young guy, and for his sake, come back strong.
Now, Dan, how accurate are those reports that Devin was requesting DAZN to remove the fight footage, erase it, requesting it from YouTube? I don't know if that's a rumor at this point or if it's actually been reported as fact.
I've seen those things on social media. To my thought, it's a rumor because Devin has forcefully come out and said that was complete bullshit. So, and I'm not even sure how you can do that. I mean, when stuff happens on the internet, you can't scrub it. It's there forever in some form or fashion. And I don't think Devin Haney, he doesn't not acknowledge what happened in the fight. So he knows he got knocked down, 3 times by Ryan Garcia. He knows what happened in the fight. Him and I have talked about that. That's not any secret. You're not going to ever erase that. His perspective was simply that he felt like the fight should have been made a no contest, which is the norm. It's not like he was asking for anything abnormal. Yes, the commission could have opted to change it to a loss. They didn't do so. But he said to me that he didn't want to change it to a loss. We played it on the Title Sports Network, the interview. He said that he wanted it to a no contest. He wasn't looking to get a victory out of it. He just wanted that appropriately taken care of off his record. Because here's the reality, Michelle, whatever anybody thinks, if you are caught with PEDs, however they got there, the result of the fight is going to get changed. End of story. That's just what it is. But you're not going to ever be able to erase what actually happened. We still remember what happened. We still remember the left hooks that Ryan Garcia landed. And so I don't think Devin Haney was looking to have footage removed. That's absurd.
Yeah, exactly. Again, a lot of stuff floats online. You never know what's being reported as fact, rumor at this point. But it's good to know. I thought that was the case. It was just a rumor. But moving forward with Teofimo Lopez, this fight this weekend, he's mentioned that, 147 could be on deck for him. As the men, as men age, their muscle sits differently, the weight sits differently, cutting weight is different. But he has said, look, I really want Terrence Crawford. I would love Terrence Crawford. And the thing is, what I want to ask you is, first of all, what do you make of him challenging Terrence Crawford? But secondly, Terrence Crawford, when he challenged Canelo to move up 2 weight classes, everybody thought of it as, well, that's an excellent idea. But when Teo's asking, hey, I want to fight Terrence Crawford to move up 1 weight class, hell, even at catch weight, if that's the case, it's looked at as almost absurd. So what do you make of him, daring to be great and taking on Terrence Crawford?
Well, I never argue with the fighter's desire to be great and to do things that are not the norm. That's what makes the great fighters. We can go back through history and see fighters that have done that. Take a look. Manny Pacquiao went up 8 different weight classes. We look at, Sugar Ray Leonard went up 2 weight classes and fought Marvin Hagler coming off a huge layoff. Everybody thought he was going to get destroyed. He won the middleweight title and one of the most significant wins in the history of the sport. And we can talk about a million of those. I think the pushback that there may have been is that Crawford is dominating and kicking ass everybody he fights and is not inconsistent and destroys everybody. And the thought was, okay, he probably could handle a move up potentially against a Canelo Alvarez, who is he may be the undisputed super middleweight champion, but he's not a big super middleweight. If he wanted to, certainly Canelo could still fight in the middleweight division. Teofimo Lopez has never fought above 140 pounds and has been inconsistent. It's not like he's been destroying everybody or winning easily. He struggled in fights. And so I think that's where it's not that you can't jump up and do that. It's that you look at what they've done in recent fights against opposition that, frankly doesn't hold a candle to the talent level that a Terrence Crawford has, and people would question that. I don't blame Teofimo for wanting to do that, and his timing of saying that's what he would be interested to do happens to come at a time when Terrence Crawford is leaving the welterweight division and going up to the junior middleweight division for his fight that's going to take place in August. So it seems like there's sort of ships passing in the night. I just have a hard time seeing, at least in the, you never say never. It's boxing. We've seen a lot of crazy shit happen, but at least in the immediate future, let's call it the next year, let's say, the notion of a Lopez against Crawford fight to me is got basically no chance of happening for many different reasons.
But even at 147, even if it's not against Terrence Crawford, there is some whispers, some rumors that that could potentially be, if not next, definitely near to the next, fight or two moving up. What's your thoughts on him going to welterweight?
Well, I do think eventually that Teofimo Lopez will be a welterweight. I mean, obviously, I think a lot of it, first of all, who the heck knows? We got to see what happens in the fight that he's got coming up this weekend. But this is the normal course. Whatever happens in the fight this weekend, I guess the normal course would be at some point you're going to go up. I mean, he did what he was supposed to do, and he became the lightweight champion, unified title, scored some big wins. Won the lineal title at 140 plus the WBO title against Taylor. He's checked that off, and now he's trying to continue to defend that title. Teofimo's not an old fighter. He's still got years ahead of him, I would think, if he can stay healthy and stay motivated. But yeah, of course, at some point you'll see him at the welterweight limit. When that will take place, I really can't say. I will say this, though, Michelle. In the immediate future, assuming that he does win the fight against Steve Claggett, to my way of thinking, and he may disagree, and maybe Top Rank disagrees, and his management and whatever, but it feels like there'd be more opportunities to make more attractive fights at the moment in the 140-pound weight class for him than there would be in the immediate future at 147. So maybe I could see a couple more fights, 2 or 3 more fights, maybe the next year and a half at 140. And then, when that plays out, if you're still sharp and you're still winning and everything's good, then maybe you take the crack and you go up to 147.
Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the fight that just got announced officially and the IBF title that was relinquished, gifted by Alexander Usyk to none other than Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois. We'll be right back. And welcome back, Dan. You and I have had multiple conversations about this, whether or not the IBF title was going to be on the line when it officially got announced that Anthony Joshua was going to fight Daniel Dubois. We know that it is now on the line for their September 21st show in Wembley. Now, exciting news. Usyk said, "I'm gifting it to you, my friends." I'm giving this to you. Just thoughts on, the official announcement and, the fight, the stacked fight card that was just announced.
Well, in terms of the title, look, here's the thing. Alexander Usyk was the undisputed champion. We all saw him beat Tyson Fury. He's the lineal champion. He had all 4 belts. I think everybody at this point would consider him to be the number 1 heavyweight in the world. In terms of, and he's still lineal and he's still number 1, but because of the rules and regulations that go on and deals that get made with the boxing organizations, yeah, he made the video and said, "I'm giving this to you as my present." But the reality is he didn't have a choice. That's just the bottom line, because the only reason that the IBF sanctioned Fury versus Usyk in the first place to be for its belt, as well as the other 3, which their organization sanctioned as well, is because they did a deal for Filip Hrgović to stand aside and to be there for the winner. Now, he lost to Dubois on the 5 versus 5 card back on June 1st. But the reality was that fight was supposed to be for the vacant title. They basically made a side deal to give Usyk a little more time to have the undisputed title. And that was sort of the agreement that they were able to kind of do. That didn't make a lot of people happy because they didn't want to do it for the interim title. In the end, that's what it was. And it was always going to be that sometime before Joshua fought Dubois, it would be vacated. Now, I guess it made sense if you're going to announce the fight, have it be announced before you do a press conference and announce it as an interim title fight, only for it to become the world title fight. So the day before the press conference, Usyk vacated the title. But again, he did it in a cool way, and I admire and respect Usyk for how he handled it. But he didn't have a choice. So, and the crazy thing, and Michelle, this is what drives, I think, a lot of boxing fans crazy, is yes, that the IBF title is at stake now in that fight between AJ and Dubois, because Dubois won the interim title and then was immediately elevated to the full title holder once Usyk vacated. But Usyk already beat Joshua twice, not that much difficulty in terms of getting the wins there, and he beat the living shit out of Dubois and knocked him out last summer. So the 2 guys that he beat are now fighting for the belt that he was forced to give up. So while I respect the IBF that follows their rules, as I have stated on numerous occasions, the IBF needs to tweak and refine their rules in some form or fashion, because that should not take place where you have a man that, less than 2 months ago, went in the boxing ring in one of the biggest fights we've seen in the heavyweight division in a very long time, won against Tyson Fury in a tremendous battle, got to lift up all 4 belts, and then is forced to vacate them not that much after the fight. And the galling part about it is the guy that gets it is the guy that he just knocked out in the fight before he fought Tyson Fury. So what they're setting up here is that the winner of Dubois against Joshua, particularly if it's Joshua, is they can then make him against the winner of Usyk Fury 2. If Turkey has his way, they want Joshua to win the fight and make that fight that we've all wanted to see and make it once again for undisputed. If you saw, they had Anthony Joshua with Turkey before the press conference, hitting up Tyson Fury on a FaceTime call, basically rooting him on. You got to win the rematch so we can make the fight. So I'm not saying it's scripted, Michelle, but that's what everybody that's involved, the business side, wants to happen. Not Usyk, of course, but that's what they're sort of angling. In the meantime, Dubois and Joshua will make a great fight in Wembley. It will be for the IBF title, for what that's worth.
And a wonderful opportunity for Daniel Dubois as well, who has an impressive resume, that doesn't get enough credit ever. So it's nice to finally see him at least have his shot.
Listen, he did a tremendous job against Hrgović. He won the fight fair and square. It was a rough, tough battle. He knocked him out when a lot of people were questioning him. In his previous fight, he had done a nice job in taking care of business against Jarrell Miller, which was another tough but somewhat one-sided fight, particularly in the end when he finally was able to get the win. But before that, there was reasons why people doubted him. He looked terrible against Usyk. He almost got knocked out by a cruiserweight in Kevin Lorena, who knocked him down 3 times in the first round in a fight where many, many referees would have stopped the fight based on that. But look, I do admire and respect Dubois, like Joshua, because they've taken their lumps. They've suffered tough losses. Obviously, Joshua, getting knocked out by Andy Ruiz, suffering the 2 losses to Usyk, and has bounced back and won, some fights in a row and been active and looked good. Obviously looked good destroying Francis Ngannou, which was the end of this not long, but the few fights in a row he won. He looked good against Hellenius, etc. And Dubois, same thing, Michelle. He's rebounded the two previous wins against Jarrell Miller and Hrgović, have made him look like the fighter I think a lot of us expected when he had so much hype as a young fighter coming up. He still is young as a heavyweight. He's only 26 years old. He's got hopefully some good years left in front of him.
Right, exactly. Now, you were able to watch the press conference. Let's talk a bit about the rundown of the stacked card.
Well, I did watch the press conference. It wasn't the greatest press conference in the world. I mean, they really spend. You have Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois. They're the guys who are there to be seen by everybody. They're the stars of the show, as good as the undercard is. And you had to sit through an hour of the jibber jabber between everybody else before they ever got to the main event fighters. But that's a different story for another day. But in terms of the card itself, what Matchroom Boxing and Frank Warren at Queensberry and their teams and Spencer Brown and the Saudis, Turkey, and everybody, they put together another very good card. Now, if you're a British boxing fan, this is a loaded card. I'm not sure it translates necessarily to those of us who follow more on the American scene or things that are not necessarily so British-centric. But myself as a diehard, I think it's a very good card because you got whatever you think about the IBF title at stake, Michelle. Do we not expect Joshua Dubois to be a good fight? I mean, come on. We expect that. It's absolutely going to be a good fight. And so the fights they've made for that undercard, you have Tyler Denny. This is actually an amazing story. Tyler Denny defended the European title this past Saturday and wins a technical decision over Felix Cash. On Sunday, they get the call about interest in trying to make a fight on this card. And on Tuesday, they get the fight done. On Wednesday, he's at a press conference, 3 days after he just got a win. Now we match up with Hamza Shiraz defending the European title. That's a whirlwind, as you could expect.
Right, yeah.
Shiraz looked really good, knocking out Ammo Williams on the 5-on-5. So that's one of the fights. They have that, at least at the moment, that was in the co-feature spot on the show. And then you got other fights. You got Anthony Casacci, who had the big upset against Cordina to win the IBF title at 130 pounds. He's going to defend the title against Josh Warrington. Now, Warrington's coming off with some losses. He's moving up in weight, but he's a big name, always gives a tremendous effort. They've made that fight for his first defense. They were able to get an exception. Remember, earlier in the week, he was supposed to have a purse bid for his mandatory against Nunez. But they were able to work out a deal where Nunez is going to step aside and has been promised that he will get an opportunity to fight the winner between Casacci and Warrington by the end of this year. So that exception was worked out, and so he'll defend against Warrington on the card. You've also got a very interesting fight to me is the light heavyweight interim WBO title. Better Biev is the champion. He's injured. So Buatsi and Willie Hutchinson are going to fight for the interim title. Buatsi has been sitting there. They thought he was going to be fighting Anthony Yard, but Yard is caught up in his own protracted contract issues with Frank Warren, so he was not available for the fight. And Buatsi was already the mandatory for the WBA based on his big win against Dan Aziz. But they were able to make this fight with Willie Hutchinson, who's coming off his own big win against Craig Richards that was also on the 5-on-5. And that's going to be, I think that is like a sleeper fight on this card between Buatsi and Willie Hutchinson. And, Turki Al-Sheikh has not made any secrets about the fact that his favorite fighter is the lightweight from England, Mark Chamberlain. So they've matched him up on this card against Josh Pedley. He's going to defend his regional title. Whatever you think about Mark's future in the sport, he's got some good wins. He's looked good on these last two Saudi cards. Turkey loves him, so he's getting some great exposure. He makes fun fights. He'll be in the opener of that. And then they also made a middleweight fight between Liam Smith, who's coming off getting knocked out in the rematch against Eubank Jr. after he knocked him out in the first fight. And they matched him up with Josh Kelly, who is moving up from 154 pounds to 160. That's like a good all-British kind of, let's duke it out between these two guys. And they've made like a card that has a lot of fights where there's a lot of fights on there where you kind of can see it going either way and provide some good action. Wembley's going to be rocking that night. They'll be, I know they've been talking about trying to get the limit for the attendance as big as possible. It's already been 90, 94 or whatever I think it was for one of the Fury fights. Turkey wants it to go to 100. And whatever they go to, that's going to be a huge crowd.
Oh, I know. Carl Froch ain't going like that.
It's going to be a big event, big show, big crowd, and some great fights.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just listening to you is like, Jesus, it just keeps going and going and going. So I'm definitely happy. I plan to be there for that fight on September the 21st. But Dan, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to wrap this up now. Thank you so much for joining me once again. We will be speaking post-fight. And that would be post Teofimo Lopez versus Steve Claggett. So make sure you guys tune in for Dan and I to break down the results of that fight. Anything left, Dan?
I think we covered it all, Michelle.
But yeah, we'll let's go ahead and we'll speak to you on technically Sunday morning, but post fight.
Sounds good to me.
All right, thank you. Thank you guys for tuning in. Bye, fight fans.